know, numbers are always a little hard to gauge for week 12. So good job on getting here. Yeah, so it's been a pretty good semester. We do look forward to your feedback about forums and any ideas or suggestions you have for future forums. Please feel free to get in touch. But with that little plug, I will stop talking and I'll get Helen Bell to start her talk on the topic of rest. So it's going to be a little bit more of an interactive kind of forum than some I've had previously, so it'll be a little bit more discussion based. So if you are on a table with only a few people, we might spread ourselves out from the big table first, just so there's actually groups. But yeah, we'll see what you think.
Yeah. We'll break up and just have a couple of blocks where we talk about what we're hearing. So probably good to centralise tables if that being the case.
All right,
but you can do that then.
Helen. Thanks.
The topic I've got is how do we rest in a busy world? And I think for many of us, I think what's driving this for me is many of us feel busy. Our go-to answer, how are you? Busy, tired, stressed. It's not that uncommon to hear people answer that way. So I suspect rest or our lack of it is on our minds. Now it is true that this topic has a particular resonance in week 12, and there is a certain irony about holding it now. But I think for many of us, too many of us, everyday life seems busy, not just week 12, but every day seems busy, unbalanced or stressful, unsustainably so, undesirably so. Now, I'm no expert on this, all right? So there may well be people in this room who know, in terms of the topics I'm talking about, know some aspects of it in more detail. But I have read a bit about it, and I live in the same kind of world you do, so I'm wrestling with the same issues of busyness. And this was a phrase I came up with, I am working hard to rest well. I know that's kind of a strange juxtaposition of terms, but I actually think that's where we find ourselves. We're working hard to rest well. And as I thought about the Bible, because I'm a Christian, so I'm going to think about this through a biblical lens, there's this lovely passage in a part of the Bible talking about rest where it says, make every effort to enter God's rest, which I find fascinating. So I think my experience actually matches what the Bible's telling me. I'm trying to reflect on it as a Christian, trying to understand what God says about rest, what he says about our world and me and what it means to rest well, so that I can live well in the world and, God willing, actually help others to live well in the world. So it's not just about me making life work, it's actually about me being able to talk to other people about how to make life work. And so here's my suspicion. I suspect that when it comes to rest, our world, getting away from the whole Christian worldview, just our world, has lots of useful things to tell us about why rest matters. It has lots of, how bad our lack of rest is. It has lots of useful things to tell us about how to rest, but I do wonder whether it skates over the real reasons we find it difficult to rest, whether it gets to those underlying fears or loves that actually drive us to work hard. Now, when I'm thinking about rest, I'm thinking about a variety of things. I'm thinking about sleep and tiredness, okay? And now the more I hear about sleep and its benefits, the more lack of sleep terrifies me. If you want to terrify yourself, read this book, Why We Sleep. Now, as someone who has in the past done all-nighters, I was talking to Rosemary about her thesis, and I remembered my all-nighters as my economics thesis went in. The federal budget comes down, and I remember sleepless nights, working all night in the office, trying to get that sucker out by the second Tuesday in May, right? When I think back about sleeplessness, it terrifies me because apparently we need sleep. Not just us, but every living creature needs sleep, right? It seems to come with being a creature in this world. Some need more or less, some sleep differently, but that whole idea of sleep is somehow fundamental to what it means to live in this world. Lack of sleep is a disaster, or the wrong type of sleep is a disaster. So you can read this book and discover about weight issues, gut health, dementia. Lack of sleep can and will kill you, left long enough. It's a disaster not just for our physical well-being, it's a disaster for our relationships. I think we all know that you and I are both less pleasant when we have less sleep. So it's not just about our physical health, it's actually about our relational health. It's a disaster for our communities. Fatigue has all sorts of bad consequences. I can't remember the data, but there's something about lack of sleep is equivalent to X units of alcohol when it comes to your ability to drive. And so you get signs on the side of the road, drowsy drivers die. And sometimes they take others with them. Lack of sleep is a problem. Now, I think we probably all know that's true. But we still don't sleep properly. Don't you find that fascinating? That we can know this to be true and still not sleep well. This book, if you want to have a look at Appendix 12, it'll give you some good advice on how to sleep. Talk about rituals before you sleep. Talk about food or to eat or not eat before you sleep. What do you think about? What do you do before you sleep? So if you're not sleeping well, this book has some tips, okay? Appendix 12, bring your phone, fix it. And I suspect most of it won't surprise you. Actually, as you read it, you'll think, yeah, that's not rocket science. I know that. I've heard it before. I know that I've put it into practice before. And here's the thing, I think knowing we need sleep, and even often knowing how to sleep, that's not the issue. It's making the lifestyle changes necessary for sleep that we find difficult. Why are we like that? For the record, 10 hours 2 nights ago. 8 me now. When talking about rest, I think we're not just talking about sleep and tiredness. I think we're also talking about issues like anxiety and mindfulness. See, it's hard to rest if you're constantly worried about yourself or the world, the decisions you make, the decisions others make, your inability to live up to expectations, whether yours and others. And the world we live in, there's any number of things to be worried about, anxious about, scared of. In a whole heap of ways, the world we live in is not a particularly restful place. It's not always easy to find rest in our world. I spoke with a friend of mine who's an OT about this as I was preparing for this. She's the type of person you call in to run workshops on relaxation and mindfulness, all right? This is what she does for a living. When she was talking about rest, relaxation, she described it as an active task, not a passive one. It's not just sitting on the couch watching Netflix. It's an intentional activity which kind of engages the mind, engages you physically, and produces a calming response. And I was thinking about that. I think exercise for me is relaxing. Never used to be. But I go and do my high-intensity interval classes and all I'm thinking about is one more burpee. You can do it, one more. Everything else that kind of causes those stress, it's gone. Used to be piano playing. That was what did it for me. The concentrating somehow on the getting the hands moving and the beauty of it. It's enough concentration to get rid of all the other stuff. I think that's what she means. I asked her about mindfulness in particular, and she described 3 basic techniques. Breathing, focusing on your breathing, bringing that under control, because that actually kind of affects your whole physicality if your breathing's not operating well. When you stress, it changes your breathing. How do you reduce stress? Bring your breathing back under control. Think about it. Progressive muscle relaxation, stretching, all of that kind of stuff, just helps you relieve some of the physical tensions. And then guided imagery, visualisation, actually getting your brain into a different space to drive out those other thoughts and to focus on what's happening in the moment. All of these use mindfulness, the practice of focusing on the details in the present time in different ways to kind of relax the breath and the body and the thoughts. Again, I don't think this is rocket science. MUCU Stress Less Week. The activities they had, jumping castle, bliss ball, Nutella fairy bread, wellbeing classes, Bollywood dance. Right, that was last week. We're a week behind. La Trobe Uni, where I used to work, they used to bring in a petting farm of young animals. You really should talk to MUCU about upping their game, all right? Therapy dogs in the Rowdy Library, I think they can do better. It's true. Any number of apps available to help you kind of put some of these things into practice. To actually help you focus on healthy thoughts, helpful thoughts. And if anxiety is an issue for you, please do something sooner rather than later. See a medical professional who knows these things. Me giving you a 2-minute summary of things you can do isn't isn't really what you want. It's like going to the internet to help you kind of sort out your health issues. Go to someone who knows what they're talking about, because ideally you don't want to be dealing with it in 10 years' time when it's become more ingrained. So if that's you, please do something. Now I'm thinking about this as a Christian, and it seems to me these are really useful tools, some of them, to actually manage the effects of anxiety, of worry, of stress on us. But as I spoke to my OT friend, the way she described it, because she's a Christian, she said they're useful. They control the symptoms, but they're somewhat short-term fixes. That there's actually something sitting under that, some fear, some love, some desire, that really, that's what we want to be getting a grip on. Not just managing the symptoms, but dealing with the cause. I read about an anxiety course, and as they were talking about mindfulness and dealing with the world, essentially it came down to you have to learn to accept that the world is an uncertain place. You can't control it. Accept that. And as far as it goes, I think, yeah. But there's got to be more to be said than that. Deal with the fact that it's uncertain. I think as Christians can. And somehow when we talk about sleep and tiredness, mindfulness and anxiety, we always end up with work-life balance, right? That's somehow where all of these discussions often land. And we've all heard the joke, on their deathbed, people never regret that they spend too much time at work. Right? So when we talk about work-life balance, I think we all have a suspicion that there's a good way to balance it and there's not. Yet people are driven to work. Somehow we still do it. I tend towards perfectionism. I like things to be exactly right, which means everything is always better after an additional 8 hours. I drive the work-life imbalance in my life. My husband works across different time zones, trying to line up a meeting between London, Perth, Brisbane, Montreal and Salt Lake City. Means you're working some strange hours. His work environment drives work-life balance issues. If I don't do this, someone else in my team will need to pick up the slack. Responsibility can drive work-life imbalance. Technology is fantastic, but constant connection can get a bit oppressive. Yeah, go out and relax, but always be ready for that email or that phone call. But relax. Work insecurity. Without the grades, without the performance, I won't be working, or I won't be working there for very long, because we know what the economic environment's like. Expectations of those you work for, expectations of those you work with, your family, your own expectations. Ambition, I just want to do a good job. I want to make a difference in the world. It's good what I'm doing. You can see how work-life imbalance happens pretty quickly. And we can talk about strategies to manage workflow. Apparently multitasking makes you feel busier than you actually are, even if you're good at it. You can talk about how to say no to good things, how to prioritise well, screen some things in, screen some things out. You can set goals and priorities well. I'm a diary person. Feel free to come to me if you want to talk about how to manage your diary. I run a very tight ship. But there's something deeper going on, I think. Something about what makes us feel valuable, about what makes our life purposeful, meaningful, why we care about what others think of us, why we care about what we think. In 1930, British economist John Maynard Keynes, hugely influential. If you've ever done economics, Keynesian theory is huge. Here's what he said in the 1930s. He predicted that his grandchildren's children, people in the workforce now, would only work 15 hours a week. That was his prediction. 15 hours a week is all you're going to need. And that's a great way to live, because why would you give your life to work? Keynes might have known a lot about economics, but I don't think he knew a lot about people. And that's fatal for an economist. And my thinking is we may not know much about ourselves. We can make ourselves so busy with work, we don't have time to stop and think, no time to ask the deeper questions about what we're doing and why we're doing it this way, and whether it's healthy and whether it's sustainable. Now, at this point, I've said nothing particularly Christian. Have you noticed? Just recognise the problem, which I think is one that impacts all people, including Christians. We want rest, we need rest, but there seems to be an endless list of things that stop us resting, make it hard to rest. I just want to stop for a moment and in groups, so maybe just around your table, what, about enough for 3 tables worth? Just a few questions to think about this for you. How good are you at resting? Why not? What strategies have you tried to make life more restful and how successful were they? What do you think drives your or our busyness? Just have a bit of a chat about that before we start thinking about what the Bible, what Christians can say to this. I'm going to talk just a little bit about how the Bible might help us understand rest. No, I didn't start with that. I think Christians don't just get wisdom from the Bible. We do get wisdom from the world as we seek to understand it. But the Bible is a book that gives us insight into ourselves, not just from us looking at each other, but from God giving us wisdom from his perspective. It's a book that talks about who we are and who God is. It's a book that talks about how God works in the world and how he works in our lives, what he promises us, and how these promises come into being. I think it tells us how to live well in a world that God made. Now, if that is true, if what I've said is just true, you would expect the Bible to describe people and the world we live in well. You would expect the things it says to resonate with the reality of the world we live in, to resonate with who we know ourselves to be. Now, as it turns out, the Bible says quite a lot about rest. It gives me perspective, God's perspective on me and my world, and rest is a key part of it. The opening chapters of the book of the Bible talked about God creating the world and then God resting. And resting for God seems to be about looking at the world he made, the people he made, and saying that is good. That's very good. Resting seems to be something about enjoying the world he made, enjoying the people he made, enjoying the product of his work. It seems to be about God enjoying his relationship with the creation. And as we move through the Bible, we see God establishing a particular relationship, a special relationship with the nation of Israel. He frees them from slavery. He brings them into a land to live in. He tells them what healthy relationships look like, what the good life is. And one summary of the good life that God wants for his people, the way he tells them this is how you will live well as my people in the land, is the 10 Commandments. They kind of cover the big ticket items, right, about relating to God well. Don't make a statue out of him because he's bigger than a statue. All right, a statue's not going to come anywhere near to who he is, so don't do it. It tells us about how to relate to each other. Don't commit a murder, don't commit adultery, kind of the big ticket items when it comes to relating to God and relating to the world. Now, here's something that fascinated me when I first started thinking about it. One of the 10 Commandments is a command to rest. Now, when I was thinking about that, I thought, man, if I was God and reducing how to live in the world, how to live well, to 10 things, I'm not sure that rest would have been one of the big 10. Now, I suspect that tells me that rest is far more important than I think it is. And the lack of rest is far more serious than I think it is. Let me just read through the 2 times the command to rest comes up in the 10 Commandments. Comes up in Exodus 20. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Deuteronomy 5. Observe the Sabbath day, keeping it holy as the Lord God has commanded, 6 days, etc., etc. And then you get to verse 15. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. The 2 versions are mostly the same. You are to rest, not just you, but everything around you, which makes complete sense. We know the risk of I can rest, but I rest at the expense of others. I think he's saying here the way we rest actually has to be a community activity. I can't rest on the back of others' hard work. They're the kind of conversations we have about weekend labour rates, I think. To what extent is it appropriate to have people working so that I can go watch a movie and have a coffee when I want one? They're the type of conversations we have when we talk about labour overseas and enjoying the product of their work while they have to work hard. We're allowed to rest, but we shouldn't rest. We're commanded to rest, but we shouldn't rest in a way that exploits others, makes them work so that we can rest. The Exodus version connects human rest to God's rest. He created, he rests. Now, the Bible's view of humanity is that we're created in the image of God. An aspect of that is that God rests. I think an implication of it is that so should we. There's an aspect of rest that is godlike. We were created in his image for it. We rest like God, but in a kind of creaturely way. If rest from God's perspective is about God enjoying his relationship with his creation, I wonder whether rest from our perspective is to enjoy our relationship with our Creator in the world he created. We rest in a right relationship with him. We rest like God. It's all about enjoying relationships, but in a creaturely kind of way. Which I think means our ability to rest depends on embracing who we are. Embracing that we're a creature, not the creator. Embracing God, who is our creator. The Deuteronomy version connects human rest to life with God in the promised land. And I think it's telling me that rest, we should rest because rest is the goal of life. That's the end point. Rest is not just functional, rest so that you can work again. There's more happening there than that. It's not just rest so that your productivity can increase, although that does appear to happen. Rest is part of the goal of life. We're built for it. We're heading towards it. If you keep reading through the Bible, one of the ways the new creation is described, the future that we look forward to, is rest. And in a world that's very busy, that is a fantastic hope to have. That busyness is not the end. Rest is. All right, so I'm thinking about how to rest well that comes out of this. So I'm trying to work out some implications of that for how we rest. See, I think one of the things the Bible encourages me to do is to embrace my need for rest. To embrace the fact that I'm a creature, not the creator. That sleep is not a design flaw that God made a mistake about. He built it into me. And when I choose not to rest, deny my need to rest, I wonder, am I actually telling God he did a bad job? He should have made me different. Asserting independence, claiming self-sufficiency. I'm the creature, not God. I'm limited and vulnerable. I need sleep to be well. I need sleep to relate well. Sleep's not just a health but a moral issue if it affects how we love our neighbour. It's not a design flaw. Physicality is not a design flaw, it's who we are. So I think there's a rest that comes from knowing who you are and embracing it, not fighting against it. The Bible describes humans as embodied souls, mind, body, health going together. So it makes sense to me that physical exercise would help your restfulness, help your mind. Mindfulness makes sense to me. I would expect breathing and mind exercises and emotional health to go together. Fits my broader understanding of who I am. So I think one of the first things the Bible says is embrace rest as a good thing, not a necessary evil. The Bible encourages us to trust God and rest. See, my suspicion is that one of the things that drives our lack of rest is fear. If the world was a safe place, the limitation and the vulnerability that comes with being a vulnerable creature would not be a frightening thing. But the world isn't that safe a place. Survival of the fittest. If the world is random. If people are self-centred and not generous, rest, true rest, is very hard to come by. But there is an alternative. The world does, I think, feel like it's out of control from our perspective. Because from my perspective, it is. It is out of my control. But it's not out of control from God's perspective. He is God and I'm not. So yeah, I'm a creature and that makes me vulnerable and fragile, but I'm a creature loved by God and that makes me safe. I know I'm a creature loved by God because the flow of the Bible is God's big promises being made and kept over time. God's promises to send a saviour who would defeat death. God's promises to bring suffering to an end. God's promises to walk with people in the midst of evil. He promised all of that and Jesus came. Why can I rest? Because I don't need to protect my life, save my life. That's God's job. And if I trust him to do that, I can rest. So I wonder whether our inability to rest might reflect a lack of trust in God. God's goodness, God's decision to care for us. I don't need to rest to save the world, provide for them. When we look around at the things that need to be done, protection of animals, ending of wars, ending of Ebola, part of what drives us is the need to do good things. So I think the world's a scary place, not just for me, but for others. To understand that I'm a creature and God is the creator, and I'm a creature that God loves and is doing good for, the problems of the world don't become mine to solve. That frees me to work well while recognising my constraints, my need for sleep, my limited knowledge about the world and the implications of my decisions. God gives me responsibility to look after myself and look after others, sure. But it's a dependent responsibility, accountable responsibility, not an absolute responsibility. And if that's true, I should be able to say no to good things if I can't do them. Because if God is sovereign and if God is good and if God is in control, I can trust him to do what needs to be done. So I can say no to good things because they don't need to be done by me. Or if they do, God can free up my time so that I can do them. Or God can raise up someone else to do, or maybe they don't even need to be done, despite what I think. So I think part of learning to rest is learning to trust God to do what needs to be done, to make the world a safe place, to provide for us in our limitations, embrace being the creature and embrace the God who cares for the world he created. And that's not just about looking forward to what I need to do. I think that's about how we look backwards, about what we've done and the consequences of it. I don't know about you, but part of my lack of rest is reflecting on the mistakes I've made, the damage I've done. That's real. Believing in a God who is sovereign allows me to ask him to fix it, allows me to ask him for forgiveness, allows him to pray for the people or the situations I've created and ask him to work good out of it, because that's what God has done and promises to do. So I think about mindfulness and meditation, which is all about trying to find peace in an anxious world. The practice of mindfulness is kind of to focus on the emotion, to focus on the now, to calm down and think, to focus on the mind, to focus on the body. I go to my gym class and we have stretch and reflect. And as part of that, there's mindful meditation. Here's some of the things I was told 2 weeks ago. You need to learn to forgive yourself. I'm not sure why. But my real problem was forgiving myself. Now, at one level, I think yes. But at another level, that doesn't fix the damage I've done, and it doesn't address the people I've hurt. The other thing I was told to do was to exhale the dark smoke from within me. Because if I've got to forgive myself for the past, I somehow need to change myself for the future. And at one level, that's not an unhelpful kind of image, but it doesn't change anything. I was also told to be a tree and put my roots into the ground. Mm-hmm. Which again, if you believe we're at one with the world, with the creation, actually makes, if you believe we are the same as the tree, that there's some spirit that is the same in us all. That actually makes sense. You find certainty by putting your roots into that. There's a sensibleness about that in certain worldviews. But because I believe that I am forgiven by God, there is a much deeper, more profound way of dealing with all of those things. A rest that comes from being forgiven, and a rest that comes from a God who is able to work good out of my mistakes. One of the other things that I think drives our lack of rest is the search for significance and value. The Bible encourages me to trust God for significance and value. See, if work is where we get significance and value, rest is really hard to come by because we need to keep working. Here's a piece written in the New York Times in 2012, Tim Kreider. Busyness serves as a kind of existential reassurance, a hedge against emptiness. Obviously, your life cannot possibly be silly or trivial or meaningless if you're so busy, completely booked, in demand every hour of the day. I think he's trying to say that our schedules, our busyness gives us a sense of purpose. Busy people are important people. Busy people are people who make a difference in the world. And if that's true, rest will be hard to come by. But there is an alternative. To trust God to give an identity and a life that is more than work. An identity grounded in being created and loved by God, not because of what you've done, not because of what you will do, not because of what you produced for him or others, but because he chooses to love you. So what drives our lack of rest? I actually wonder whether we undervalue it and we misunderstand it. If rest is about enjoying God and the world he put us in, part of it is enjoying the good things of life, a rest that leads to joy and celebration, a rest that comes from secure relationships, not just with each other, but with God. I think I first started reflecting on rest properly when I was in my 40s, which is really sad. I started reflecting on it on long service leave. Long service leave is a gift of God, frankly. Right? No other nation has it from what I can work out. 3 months leave after 10 years. It's magnificent. On long service leave, and I was tired going into it, we went to Cuba and I learned how to salsa. I've still got it. I walked away from the ministry I was doing, confident that God had it covered. Because it was actually his work, not my work, that he chose to use me in. I'm the creator, not the creator. I potted around the house and painted the backyard fence. I watched Pride and Prejudice whole day. I caught up with friends and I remembered why I liked them so much. You know when you see someone after a gap and you think, yeah, I really like you. I know why we're friends. See, I think long service leave was an opportunity for me to rest by stopping work, knowing that God gives life, not me. My life does not depend on my work, nor does anyone else's. It was an opportunity to rest by enjoying God's gift of family, friends and home. Not just enjoying the gifts, but then going back to the one who gives them and enjoying a relationship with him, because it's kind of sad if you just enjoy the gifts and not the giver. Experiencing the glorious diversity of God's creation as I wandered through Cuba, and embracing my creaturely limitations by sleeping and exercising properly. All of which led me to praise our good and sovereign God. Thankful for his gifts, dependent on his care, content in my limitations, confident that it was Jesus that saves me, provides for me, for all my needs, physical, spiritual, not me. It's made me look forward to rest when Jesus returns. Because if that's just a taste of what the future holds, rest in a restless world, what does it look like when the fullness comes in? I've chucked out lots of ideas about rest from a biblical perspective. Go back to your groups. Did any of them grab you? Any of them interest you? Which ones struck you and why? Which ones do you have questions about?
Okay guys, just to wrap it up, but actually feel free to stay and chat a little bit longer and please eat the snacks. But we're just going to wrap it up in case anyone has to rush off to class. Yeah, so thank you so much, Helen, for coming and speaking to us about the topic of rest. Definitely, I think, a useful topic at this time, and just generally, like, this whole semester, like, for me, I know at least, like, everything Helen's mentioned, I'm just like, oh, yeah, that's me, okay, cool, getting all these side effects probably in, like, 10 years, cool. So, yeah, definitely, if you want to know more about that, feel free to contact Helen. I'm sure she's got advice for you and book recommendations and helpful tips for life.
I'll just dispense wisdom.
Yeah, she will. She actually will. So, yeah, I would recommend you get in contact with her or someone if you want to find out more about that. But, yeah, thank you so much for coming along to forums. If you've come to any of the forums this semester, yeah, we're really glad you came along. We hope you took something from it. Next semester, we will, of course, be back. We don't know what location yet, so just stay tuned for that. But so far, it's looking like it'll be the same time, same day. Yeah, we've got the first 6 weeks lined up. So we're going to have a few different talks. We're going to have one on evolution from an expert at La Trobe, I think. For the science theme faculty, we're going to have Sharon Chung come in. If you guys know her, she works with, thank you, CBF, I knew it was something. She's going to be talking about careers coming from more of a commerce perspective. Yeah, and we're lining up a talk on bioethics this week as well. So that's just a taste of what we're going to have. We have not, however, booked the second half of the semester, so if you do have recommendations or requests or anything like that, please feel free to chat to me, chat to Peter or Sarah or anyone on the forum team. Ben's over there too. Or your faculty group leaders, because we're going to be liaising with them to try and get some more ideas for forums. So yeah, that's what it's looking like for next semester. As always, there is a Facebook page where we post everything. So it'll be MUCU forums. You can Google it. It's also on the CU Facebook page. So it's all connected otherwise. So you should be able to find the information there if you want to follow us and see what we're doing next semester. Also, to remind you that all the recorded talks Ryan has kindly put up on the YouTube page for CU. So if you've missed a talk or you want to go back and re-listen to one or you missed the slides or something like that, they are all up there. If you can't find it, shoot me a message, Ryan a message, or pretty much anyone who knows about forums or CU. They'll be able to point you in the right direction. Yeah, okay, guys, please feel free to, again, grab a drink. It's still boiling, so it should still be hot if you want something to go. And grab a snack. And feel free to stay around and chat until we actually get kicked out, because I don't know if there's a class after this or not. Yeah, thanks, guys.